Good afternoon again. Welcome to this Boren Awards presentation. My name is Kyle Cox, and I am here from the Boren team, the Boren Outreach team, to just give you a quick program overview, give you some of the basics of the Boren program, some ins and outs about who we are, and how to make a competitive application for one of our scholarships and fellowships awards. I myself work for the Institute of International Education, or IIE. We administer the Boren program on behalf of the National Security and Education Program. That's a subset of Delencio, which is in the Department of Defense. So we are a government-funded program, and we come from an initiative, an act of Congress that was passed in the 90s to set aside some funding for American students to go overseas and learn a language. It had been the case that American students were going abroad and they were learning languages, but often it was the same countries and the same languages. And so it was decided it'd be a good idea to set aside some funding, particularly from the Department of Defense, to encourage students to go learn languages that aren't as commonly taught here in the United States, in countries that aren't as commonly visited in US study abroad. The Boren Awards were born out of that initiative, out of that mission. As I mentioned before, we have scholarships and fellowships awards. Just the definition of what that means: scholarship, that's our awards for undergraduate students. Fellowships, that's our awards for graduate students. So if you're undergrad and you're thinking about applying, you're thinking scholarship. Grad students, you're thinking about the fellowship. I was neither a scholar nor a fellow. I had no idea what Boren was when I was in school. So it does give me extra pleasure to be able to share this opportunity with students who can still take advantage of this tremendous opportunity for funding for overseas study and for language immersion. And with that, I will go ahead and dive into who's eligible to apply for an award. First and foremost, you must be a US citizen at the time of application. You must be planning to study a foreign language in an eligible world region. So if you haven't inferred this already, this is an overseas study program. We are sending you abroad, and we want to see that language is the mainstay of your time overseas. That's your primary focus for your time while you're out of the US. I'll talk about which languages and which regions are eligible as we get on in the presentation, but for now, just keep in mind overseas study. You must be matriculated at a US institution or at the very least applying to grad school. So a bit to unpack what that means. You can't use Boren for funding after you've already graduated. You can't use Boren for like a gap year. You must still be on the books in a degree-seeking program with a US institution while you are overseas on your Boren funded study. That gets a little tricky for seniors who are pushing up against like a graduation deadline. You may have to extend your graduation, delay graduation, or maybe consider applying as a graduate student, as a fellow. But there are options there, and we encourage you to work with your university to figure out what might be the best route for you. If you're interested in applying as a fellow, but you're not in grad school yet, you can still apply. We'll just need to see that you are in a graduate program by the time you start your Boren funded study overseas. And then finally, you cannot be a citizen of the destination country. So no holding citizenship of the country you're proposing to study. But besides that, you are more than welcome to apply. These are the bars to entry. No age limit, no strict GPA minimum. You must be at least 18. For most languages, there's no proficiency minimum for the language. You can come in at any level of experience with the language, beginner, elementary, novice, the exceptions being French and Spanish, and I'll talk about those later on in the presentation. But as far as bars to entry eligibility for the program, this is it here. If you clear these hurdles, you're more than welcome to apply. Point of order, as we're going throughout this presentation, you'll see a lot of these QR codes at the top of the screen, or I think some of them might be on the bottom. Everything that I'm going to discuss in this presentation can be found on our website. So if you're interested in hearing more about something that I'm discussing on a particular slide, feel free to pull out your phone. I do not mind you using your phone during my presentation. Scan the QR code. It'll take you directly to the place on our website, our very extensive and comprehensive website, where you can learn more information about that, that particular bit of what I'm covering on that slide. If at any point in this presentation anyone has any questions, feel free to hold them to the end. I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So if questions do come up, I'm happy to answer any questions, but this presentation is being recorded, so we can wait till the end for questions. The next few slides are really important to helping you decide whether Boren is going to be a good fit for you. These are the central pillars, the core elements of who we are at Boren and what we're really looking for in a competitive application. These are the selection criteria that our review committees are really thinking about as they review applications. And so these are the things that you're really going to want to keep in mind as you're crafting a potentially competitive application for a scholarship or fellowship. First, you must recognize that we have a commitment to U.S. national security. We're looking for students who have an interest in a particular issue that is relevant to U.S. national security, U.S. interests on a global stage, and securing the United States' place in a global society. So you're going to need to, in your application, explain the relevance of your country, your language, and their connection to your current field of study as it relates to a U.S. national security issue. When we say U.S. national security, we recognize that individuals tend to immediately think defense, diplomacy, development. And all of those fall under the umbrella of U.S. national security for sure, intelligence as well. But we don't want anyone to feel tied to one of those specific interpretations of U.S. national security. We don't actually give a specific definition of what's relevant to U.S. national security. We leave it pretty broad, pretty open-ended, and we allow you as the applicant to pick an issue that you can speak to with some depth that relates to your academic interest, relates to your professional career goals. So if you're a business student and you're interested in learning more about economics and international trade policy as it relates to a particular country, if you're a student who's thinking about going into STEM, maybe the medical field, and you want to talk about infectious disease in the middle of a pandemic as it relates to that particular country. If you're interested in migration of people across borders, there's so many different ways to interpret U.S. national security, and we leave it to you to pick an issue that you can speak to in depth and with detail as it relates to that country and your current field of study. And of course, your future career goals and professional ambitions. With that aspect of national security in mind, I do have to let you know we have a service component to the Boren Awards. All Boren Award recipients are required to serve a minimum of 1 year in the federal government after they finish their academic studies and after they finish their time overseas on the Boren. That's a minimum service requirement of just 12 months, just 1 year, and it is required of all Boren recipients, scholars, and fellows. You don't need to do that service as soon as you come back from your time overseas or as soon as you finish your academic studies. There is a bit of a buffer. If you're a scholar, you've received the undergraduate award, you have 3 years to get started on this service. If you're a fellow or grad student, unfortunately, we have this expectation that grad students know what they want to do with their lives, and they only get a 2-year buffer to get started on this service. But you can delay, you can extend the time through additional academic study, taking up other prestigious awards like a Fulbright. There are ways to extend that service beyond the 2 or 3 years. And while we say you have to do some sort of service that's relevant to US national security, going back to the previous slide, broad understanding of what's relevant to US national security. So that means there's a lot of different ways to fulfill that service. There are many different roles, many different agencies currently employing Borens, and it's really on you to find some aspect of government service that's relevant to you, your interests, your professional long-term ambitions. While all we are asking for is a minimum service requirement of just 12 months, we do give preference to applicants who are thinking government work long-term, be that a significant portion of your career or maybe your entire professional career. While all we will ask you for is 12 months of your time, it looks great in an application if you're thinking government work long-term. And finally, language and culture. We're looking for students who are serious about language learning, going to demonstrate serious commitment to making language gains while they are overseas on foreign funding. It helps if you've had exposure to the language before, some experience studying the language or any language prior to applying to Boren, but for most languages, that's not required. You can come in at any level of proficiency, as I said before, beginner, novice, elementary, whatever the case might be, but we need to see your plan on how you're going to improve your language skills while you are abroad, be that in classroom study, if you're applying for the fellowship, maybe getting tutoring or doing research that's in the language. We need to see language as a central component to your time overseas. We would recommend around 20 contact hours with the language per week as a good target for your time overseas to demonstrate legitimate interest in making gains in your language study while you're abroad. So we're looking for language programs, language plans that are intensive, but also realistic, right? Like nobody's going from beginner to advanced in 12 weeks. That's not gonna happen. So set realistic language goals, but they must be challenging and feasible. And you don't need to demonstrate an interest in using the language in your career goals. We recognize not every role within government is actually going to require language. Don't try to tie yourself to a position in government or demonstrate interest in a position in government just because it has a language component. We'd rather you went with some position that made sense for your professional ambitions and your current academic studies. So if you have no interest in being a translator at some point in the future, don't put that in your application. We don't need language proficiency to be demonstrated as part of your future career goals. The next few slides will be on the types of eligible programs, the formats of Boren that you can apply for. The first would be our flagship language initiatives. These are 4 programs that we've put together with coordination from universities here in the States, as well as affiliates with American councils overseas. They're very structured, very pre-planned. There's a summer domestic component. You go overseas for the fall, and we've planned out pretty much soup to nuts the entire structure of the African Flagship Language Initiative, the South Asian Flagship Language Initiative, the Indonesian Flagship Language Initiative, and the Turkish Flagship Language Initiative. And I'll go into each one of those more in depth over the next few slides. But there's also the self-identified programs or self-designed programs. This is the route that most applicants take, where it's literally as described, it's self-identified. You pick the study abroad program, the location, duration of time, your housing situation. It's all on you to propose a study abroad plan for which Boren will just be the funder. And we strongly recommend that you work with your campus representatives there at Duke to figure out a study abroad plan that makes the most sense for you. Boren in that case is just the award, the grant, the funding for that proposed time overseas. Going back to the flagship language initiatives, these are eligible to all levels, beginner to more advanced proficiency levels in the languages. We test you prior to going overseas, and we'll make sure that your instruction is tailored to your current language level. They're all fully funded, both the domestic portion and the time abroad. It's all covered within your Boren Award. These are also credit bearing. Depending on which flagship language initiative you receive, you could get credit from either Bryn Mawr, University of Florida down in Gainesville, or University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. They tend to be intensive, small classroom study, good ratios between students and instructors. The summer courses at a US institution. I'll talk about which institution for which program as we get into the next few slides. All of the fall courses overseas are at a destination that we have picked for you. You'll be staying with a local family while you are overseas. And while the summer domestic is required, the fall overseas is required. There is the option to stay overseas for the spring as well with all of the flagship language initiatives, though that is optional. The spring is not required. Encouraged, but not required. Starting with the African Flagship Language Initiative, or the AFLI, the languages are French in Senegal, Swahili in Tanzania, Akan or Chi in Ghana, Wolof in Senegal, Zulu in South Africa. The summer domestic component is at the University of Florida. You'll go there for 8 weeks, I believe, is the case for all of the summer domestics. One thing worth noting about French, for any of you who are interested in doing French as a foreign funded study, French is only preferred under the AFLI. This is your best option and really your only true viable option for proposing French as your Boren study, your Boren funded language. And for French, this is one of the 2 languages that you do need to have prior experience with the language. You need to be at least intermediate in your proficiency with French at the time of applying. We will test you before officially conferring the award, but you must be at least intermediate in French for that program in Senegal. The programs in Ghana, Senegal, and South Africa for Akan, Chi, Wolof, and Zulu, we don't actually have designated overseas programs for those. We don't get a ton of applications for those every year, but if you were to win an award for one of those languages, we would work with you to identify your own overseas program in those countries. Again, the summer domestic is required, the fall overseas is required, but as is the case for all of the FLIs, the spring overseas is optional for the AFLI. The Indonesian Flagship Language Initiative for the study of Indonesian in Malang, Indonesia. The summer domestic program is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, and the overseas study is again optional for extended time in Indonesia. The South Asian Flagship Language Initiative, or SAFLI, summer domestic program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. The fall overseas programs are Hindi in Jaipur, Urdu in Lucknow, India for both of those. And the spring overseas program is again optional. And then finally, the newest of the group, I believe this is the 3rd year for the TURFLI, the Turkish Flagship Language Initiative. The summer domestic component is also at the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. The fall overseas program is in Baku, Azerbaijan, technically Turkey, not a preferred Boren country, but Baku is actually a pretty dope city. I learned recently they have Formula 1 racing, which I just became a fan of, so it's actually kind of cool. And you can still get great immersion in Turkish in Baku. And then again, fall overseas is optional. That's it for the flagship language initiatives. Those are the 4 offerings. And a couple of things worth noting about the flagship language initiatives is they're great for beginners. All you want is that immersion in the language. I'm telling you, all you're doing while you're overseas, all during the fall and even during the summer, there's not a lot of time for like an internship or additional academic study. It's language, language, language all day. And that can be phenomenal if that's what you want, like just learning the language. Also, if you're having trouble designing your own study abroad program, these are put together for you. You just apply for the programs that we've set and we've put together. So those are the advantages to the flagship language initiatives. However, the vast majority of applicants do go the self-identified route, where, as I said before, you're designing your own program, you're putting together a study abroad proposal for which Boren scholarship or fellowships will just be the funder. If you are going the self-identified route, do not walk to your campus rep's office as soon as you start your Boren application. You're going to have questions for which Boren cannot be the answer. We can't tell you which insurance to use while you're overseas. We cannot recommend preferred study abroad programs. We leave that to you to work with your campus reps to figure out a plan that makes sense for while you're overseas. So please, as soon as you open your application, you've decided that you're going to apply, schedule to meet with your Boren campus reps and get their insight, get their assistance, get help from the study abroad office on piecing together these key components of your Boren application. We do have some third-party providers that we can recommend if you need to go to an additional database to find study abroad programs. IIEpassport.org, that's run by the Institute of International Education for whom I work. You can search for programs by country, language, duration, time of year, all of that. And that helps you find study abroad programs. There are other directories out there as well. I believe it's .com, gooverseas.com as well. There are lots of directories out there for finding third-party programs if you need, but please make sure your own university is your first point of contact. Scholars tend to gravitate more towards these sorts of programs, especially for in-classroom academic study or language learning at a university or a particular language institute abroad. Fellows have some flexibility, but fellows have some options that they can consider for their time overseas. They can do in-classroom study. Fellows can do an internship. Fellows can also do graduate level research. We have helped fund people's dissertation in the past. We're happy to do so, as long as whatever you're doing, we see language is still a core component of your time overseas. So are you getting tutoring in the language outside of your research? Is your internship with colleagues who will be speaking the language and making you test your professional speaking abilities in that language? Where does language fit in? How is language still a core component of your internship or research? We need to see that as part of your application. Are you doing research in the language? Like whatever the case might be, we still need to see language as the centerpiece of your Boren Fellowship if you're not doing academic study as a fellow. I keep talking about Boren as the funder. How much funding am I talking about? A maximum award of $25,000 for your overseas study. That's a maximum award for both scholarships and fellowships of $25,000 for anyone who's proposing overseas study of 25 to 52 weeks. That's how you make sure you get the most money out of Boren. Propose to go for as long as possible. For 25 to 52 weeks, the maximum award you could receive, $25,000. For anyone going for less than that proposed 25 weeks, 12 to 24 weeks, 12,500 is the max for both scholars and fellows. Undergraduate STEM students, you all are a lucky group. We recognize that it can sometimes be difficult for undergraduate STEM students to get away from their course requirements for extended period of time. And so we're nice, we have an out for 8 to 11 weeks during the summer for $8,000, maximum award of $8,000. And that's just for undergraduate STEM students, only undergraduate STEM students, that initiative of 8 to 11 weeks for $8,000. Again, $25,000 is the max for fellows, $12,500 if you're going for the 12 to 24 weeks, 12 being for both scholars and fellows outside of the undergraduate STEM, the shortest amount of time you can propose for Boren funding. Outside of the undergraduate STEM students, no one goes for less than 12 weeks. Fellows do have the option for additional funding in the States before they go overseas. If you wanted to learn the language here in the States the summer prior to going abroad, you can request additional funding for that domestic study, up to $12,000 for that domestic study. No one gets more than $30,000 in total. So do keep that in mind. If you want additional funding as a fellow for domestic study prior to going overseas, if you want all $25,000 for your time overseas, that leaves you with $5,000 for domestic study. If you want all $12,000 for the domestic study, that leaves you with $18,000 for your time overseas. No one gets more than $30,000 in total. But do keep in mind as a fellow, if you wanted additional funding for domestic study of the language this summer before going abroad, that is an option. Now we ask as part of your application that you submit a proposed budget. It's tentative, these are all estimates, but these are all things that Boren will cover. These are all things that your award should go to fund. And so we'll want you to start thinking through as soon as possible, how much are these things going to cost, and put together a tentative budget as part of your application. First thing, of course, your transportation to and from the destination country. It must be compliant with the Fly America Act. The Fly America Act means use an American carrier, American Airlines, Delta, United, one of their affiliates. Nobody flies for Boren first class. I fly for Boren for a living and I've never flown first class, so please get a nice economy or reasonable estimate for that ticket. But at the same time, no need to go on Kayak or Expedia and get the one trip to Taiwan with 11 layovers. Don't do that to yourself. Get a nice reasonable estimate for this airfare and work that into your budget. All program tuition and materials, your costs of your courses, costs of the program, books, things of that nature. Once you know those costs, please include them in your budget as well. Overseas medical insurance. We at Boren will not tell you which insurance you have to use. We leave that to your university to point you in the right direction when it comes to overseas medical insurance. But whichever insurance they tell you to enroll in, we can cover that enrollment. All lodging and food costs for time in country. This will take some investigation and research. What is the cost of living in your destination country? What will be your plan for living in your destination country? Are you going to a university, living in the dormitory, eating out of the cafeteria? Are you trying to rent your own apartment and cook for yourself? Are you going to stay with a homestay with a local family, hoping they're nice enough to feed you? What is your plan for your time overseas? I'm joking. Most homestays, they will feed you. What is your plan for your time overseas? Figure out those food costs, including local transportation. How are you getting around while you're on the ground? Factor that into your budget as well. Visa fees and visa-related travel. This is fairly new. We only just last year started covering this. If you're in country and you need to leave for visa purposes, and anticipate that travel, include those costs in your budget as well. Things we will not cover. We will not cover the cost of passports. We will not cover any vaccinations. We will not pay a single dime for anyone who's not you. And no personal travel or entertainment while in country. So while as a nerd, I strongly recommend you always go see the local theater and check out the newest Marvel movie. Do not include the cost of the ticket in your budget. Things you need to know before I leave this slide. Most important, there is no competitive advantage whatsoever to a low estimate. We don't care. So please don't try to low estimate your budget, hoping that gives you an edge. At no point are we looking at two competitive applications and saying, oh no, how do we pick? Go with the one that's cheaper. Like, that's not a deciding factor for us. Please put in the estimates of what you genuinely, honestly believe your study abroad experience is going to cost. Do not find yourself in a situation where you've gone overseas, you run out of funding, and now you need to come back to Boren and ask for some additional money. And we're like, nah, bro, sorry. Please know how much this is going to cost up front, even if that means you need to get additional sources of funding, because it's going to be more than the proposed maximum $25,000. Now you know you need to go find other sources of funding. That's fine for us. We don't, as long as it's clear who's paying for what, we don't mind you getting additional sources of funding. So just know how much the study abroad experience is going to cost, budget accordingly, because low estimates do not help at all, only hurt. Next few slides are our preferences. I do have to emphasize the word preference. These are the things that will make the strongest application. These are the things that will really stand out to us in our selection committees, but they are not requirements. These are not eligibility requirements. So if you don't see yourself meeting one of these preferences, don't freak out. We're still more than welcome to apply. You're just going to need to find a way to articulate why you're not meeting the preference. For example, duration of overseas study. This is our biggest preference. This is the big cheese. Like, this is the top one. How long are you proposing to go overseas? Full disclosure, the longer the better. You can see from this chart that's up on the slide, almost 85% of fellowship recipients over the last few years were proposing 25 weeks or more. And really among the fellows, it's like 9 months. They really push the length of time. For scholars, about 76% of recent scholarship recipients were going 25 weeks or more. That's, again, not to say that it's impossible to go for shorter periods of time, but you need to justify it. You've got on-campus requirements, work requirements, family needs, whatever the case might be. We've got to see a legitimate reason for why you're going for a shorter period of time, because our preference is long-term overseas study. And we recognize that that's weird. We're kind of unusual within United States study abroad with this emphasis on long-term study. Most programs are 11 weeks or less, but we want you to go overseas to learn a language, right? And so it kind of just makes sense. You're learning a language, the longer you can be there exposed to the culture in which the language is spoken, the better for your proficiency gains. So that's why we have that overseas duration of time expectation and preference. If you need to stack programs, say you find one program that's 8 weeks and you find another program that's another 12 weeks and you want to combine them, totally fine. As long as they're all in the same country and you're only learning one language, that's fine. That's not a problem. Stack them, stretch that time however you want. Not a problem to us, but our preference is the longer the better. Our next preference would be location, location, location. For this, I strongly recommend you go to our website and pull up the actual list of preferred countries to see which countries are on our eligible list. Just going off of this map here that's on the slide, if it's in gray, that's a no. The United States is not a study abroad destination. Canada, they mostly speak English. Australia, the wildlife is terrifying and they mostly speak English. I'm kidding, Australia is lovely. Western Europe, you'll note that Western Europe is a no-go zone as well. Not to say that Western Europe is not important. Of course it's important, especially for national security reasons. We've got lots of partners in Western Europe. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're trying to get students to go to countries that aren't quite as commonly visited, and Western Europe is just too popular. For countries that aren't quite as commonly visited, check out the countries in green. Green means go, all thumbs up, feel free to apply. If it's a country on this map that's in blue, I like to call those our Facebook countries because we have an it's complicated relationship status. Maybe we could send you to that country this year, but maybe not. All of the countries that are in blue will have an asterisk next to their name on our website. If it has an asterisk or if it's on this map in blue, you need to provide a viable backup country where you can learn the same language, but can serve as your destination in case you can't go to that preferred country. For example, the biggest one on the map would be Russia. We get so many applications every year for Russian. We haven't actually sent a Boren to Russia in a long time. You can go to Ukraine, Estonia, the Republic of Georgia, I hear is lovely. So many different countries. I think Kazakhstan is on top backup for Russian, I think, actually. But there's so many countries where you can go for Russian. And if that's what you want to do, you can put Russia as your preferred country in your application, but you need to provide one of those other countries as a backup. And that's the case for all of our asterisk countries, all of the blue countries in the map. Language preferences, long list of preferred languages. And even if the language you want to study is not on this list, you are still more than welcome to apply. You just need to make an argument for why that language is relevant to US national security. That would be the case for a lot of indigenous languages. They're not on the list, but if you can tie them to US national security, you're more than welcome to apply. We used to get an application every year for Quechua in Peru. Quechua has never been on our preferred list of languages. There was just a professor at some school who taught it at our university and would make one of her students apply for a Boren every year. And as long as they had a legit national security connection, you read the application. So as long as the language you want to study has that national security argument, you're more than welcome to apply. As I mentioned before, most languages, there's no proficiency minimum. You can come in at any level. The exceptions being French, which I mentioned before, is only preferred under the AFLI, and you must be intermediate. The other is Spanish. Those of you who have been particularly eagle-eyed and gone over this list already, you'll notice Spanish is not on the list. Spanish is not a preferred foreign language. You can propose to study it, but you have to be advanced in your proficiency prior to conferring the award, and we will test you prior to conferring the award. But for any other language that's on this list or that you could propose, no prior knowledge of the language required. And our last preference would be field of study. These are all the fields of study. These are the academic disciplines that tend to be most competitive for the Boren. These are the fields of study that tend to do the best at articulating a legitimate national security concern as it relates to issues within this field, as it relates to issues within this academic discipline. But if you're not from one of these fields of study, don't freak out. You are still more than welcome to apply as long as you can make a connection between your field of study and US national security interest. As long as you can find something in your academic discipline that's related to national security and American foreign policy, you are more than welcome to apply. You just need to make that connection. These are the fields of study that tend to have the easiest time making that connection, is why they are our preferred field of study. The next few slides are about the service component of the Boren Award. As I mentioned before, everyone who receives a Boren has to demonstrate an interest in working for the federal government and be committed to serving at least a minimum of 12 months in the government in some national security related field after they finish their academic studies and after they finish their Boren. We are not going to assign you a role. We never assign anyone a position within the federal government. It's still on you to write your resume, write an application, find positions that suit you, make sense for you based on your academic interests, make sense to you based on your professional trajectory. However, we have a lot of resources to help you with your job search. We're gonna help you. We want Borens to be able to fulfill their service. And we have a lot of resources to help you in that endeavor. The first would be our NSEP service team. They all work for our sponsor at the National Security Education Program. I believe there's 8 members on the service team now. All of them are Borens themselves. They finished their service and now their job, 9 to 5, is helping you fulfill your service. They do resume consultation. They have their own job board, nsepnet.org. .org. It's their own job database where they post jobs that have come to them. You'll have access to that as a Boren as soon as you come back from your time overseas and you can see those job postings. They get about 100 positions a year that are exclusive just to Borens, government positions where the government, the hiring agency is looking specifically for Borens. And the only place you'll find those postings is on NSEPnet. We have special hiring authorities, special security clearances to help keep your resume at the top of the list in the job search. We have a federal employment seminar every year. It's a 2-day event. Day 1 is just basic need to know info about employment, government service, security clearances, things like that. Day 2 is a job fair. And you're able to meet with hiring authorities from various agencies, see what those agencies are about, maybe leave your resume, see if you get a call back. I like to make fun of FEMA because every year that we've done the employment seminar in person, FEMA comes with like their entire HR department. It's kind of crazy. They take up like 3 tables because they come to the job fair to hire Borens. They're specifically there to leave job offers with Borens. We have the Boren Forum. That's our alumni association. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know when it comes to the employment sector, employment search in any sector. And the Boren Forum is good for that. People who are currently Borens fulfilling their service can network with you and help put you onto positions that they might be aware of. All of this to say, we're going to help you. Like, you're not stranded by yourself searching through usajobs.gov and trying to find positions. We have resources to help you with that job search. Really, while we call it a service requirement, it's very much more a service opportunity. If you're thinking about working for the government, if government service, public service is something that you genuinely want to do as part of your career, Boren is a phenomenal resource. It's a phenomenal way to get yourself in the door for an entry-level position that leads to fulfilling careers for many of our Borens. I should have asked, I don't know if you have ROTC on your campus, but if you do, please tell them about Boren. They make phenomenal applicants because they already are committed to government employment and they tend to be pretty articulate about national security concerns. So if any of you have friends who are cadets or midshipmen, make sure if they apply, they click yes on the button that says they are. And we're pretty flexible on the top preference for duration of time when it comes to cadets and midshipmen. We recognize they have some pretty strict requirements on campus as well, commission dates and things like that. And so we can be, oh good, you do, great. We tend to be very understanding, and as long as they can do the 12 weeks, they're typically good to go. As long as, you know, the rest of their application is competitive. Now, when it comes to the application, we will ask, particularly in essay 2, for you to let us know areas of government that you have in mind for your federal service. We need to see that you've given some thought to agencies that are out there, roles that are out there, things that make sense to you based on your academic interests, based on your professional long-term goals, that you've done some research, seeing what's out there, and thinking about where you could fulfill your service short and long term. In that part of your application, the agencies that really stand out to us, that are prioritized by us and our sponsors at the DoD, are the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the intelligence community, all 18 agencies, 18 agencies within the intelligence community. These are all parts of government where we know whatever you're doing can be related, will be related to US national security. Also, all of these areas of the government are pretty feasible. Like, they're massive, they've got a lot of entry-level positions. So it seems realistic that you could find something that would meet national security within one of these agencies or their contractors. If you're an engineering student and you're thinking, how do I do government work? Are you interested in working for Lockheed Martin? Government DoD contractor. So any work that's done for one of these priority agencies or one of their contractors stands out in the application for sure. But do be specific. Don't just say, I want to work for the Department of State, because that's like a bajillion different positions and roles. Let us know, specific agencies, specific areas, specific roles within these agencies, specific titles even that you would like to fulfill, and your path to achieving those responsibilities in your application. But if you're not seeing yourself fulfilling your service or working as part of your career in one of those agencies, there are dozens upon dozens of other agencies currently employing Borens. You just need to make a connection between those other agencies and national security. While these, we see the connection pretty readily. With other agencies, you're going to have to really lay it out for us. So you're more than welcome to express interest in commerce, energy, the Treasury Department, anything related to Congress. We currently have Borens serving in both administrative and scientific positions within NASA and the CDC. Department of Agriculture has its own foreign service. There's so many different ways to express interest in government service. You just need to make the connection between these agencies and US national security very clear in your application. We get a lot of interest in Peace Corps every year in our applications as well. One caveat about Peace Corps, I mentioned before that while all we're asking for is 12 months of service, we do have a preference for longer periods of time. Peace Corps is only 2 years, 24 months. And while that might seem like a long time, it's not. So if you are interested in putting Peace Corps in your application, our recommendation is say Peace Corps and then whatever the case might be to make that time look a little longer. And for some assistance on starting that search, that diving into federal careers and thinking about what might I be interested in doing, I definitely recommend scanning that QR code, going to our website. We've got a federal service guide. We link directly to databases and different job boards, and it's a great launching pad for that search into what roles are out there, what agencies are doing what, and what might you be interested in doing that would be applicable to your application. Speaking of the application, the next couple of slides go into our essays and other application requirements. And then after that, I can open it up for questions. The biggest elements of our application would be our essays. I'll talk about them a bit on the next slide. Letters of recommendation, minimum of 2 letters of recommendation for scholars, an optional 3rd for scholars, minimum of 3 for fellows. You can submit a language proficiency evaluation if you would like, though that's not required. And that's for any language. If you've done any prior study in a language, even if it's not the language you're proposing to do while you're overseas, you can submit a language proficiency evaluation from a language professor or expert to demonstrate that you have the skill to learn a language. Transcripts can be unofficial, but must be from all of your higher education career. Please make sure that if it is unofficial, that the transcript has the name of the university on it. Study plan summary, just 250 words of what you're proposing to do while you're overseas. Where are you going? Why'd you pick that institute? How long you'll be there, things of that nature. If you're a fellow and you're doing research, it's not required, but is strongly recommended that you submit an abstract or methodology. And if you're doing an internship, not required, but strongly recommended, if you can get it, a letter of overseas affiliation, just to add additional feasibility and proof that you can do what you're proposing to do. Those abstracts and those letters of affiliation go a long way as part of the application. Essay 1 is where you go into your national security argument. Why is this country, this culture, this language, this region all relevant to US national security based on this particular issue? Please make sure that that issue is something that ties to your current academic studies. I've said it a couple of times on the last slide, and I'm probably going to say it again a couple of times throughout the essay. Feasibility. We want to see that you genuinely have an interest in this particular issue, and that this is something that you can learn about while you're overseas. That's why we encourage you to tie it to your current academic studies. As a thought experiment, imagine you were meeting with a member of Congress. You don't know their pet issues, you don't know their particular pet peeves, but you need to explain to them why your study in this country is relevant to them and should be of interest to them and their constituents. What would you tell them to convince them that this issue you're studying, you're learning more about while you're overseas, should be important to them as a member of Congress? Whatever you would tell them, that's your national security argument for essay 1. Essay 2, and for that, again, please go deep, not shallow. We're not looking for broad Wikipedia articles on an issue. Demonstrate that you know something about that issue and that you can articulate that particular argument well. Essay 2, tell us your preparation for extended overseas study, your past leadership experience. If you've studied abroad before, not required, but if you have, you can include that in essay 2, cultural adaptability experiences, things like that that demonstrate your ability to thrive in an overseas setting for an extended period of time. More importantly for essay 2, like 2/3 of essay 2 should be your future career plans and the leadership qualities that you bring to government service, including your plans for government service. This is where you tell us, here's what I want to do long-term, here's how this ties into government service, this particular agency, these types of roles, and you lay all of that out in as much detail as you can in essay 2. Both essays are 800 words. 800 words for scholars. Essay 2 is actually 1,000 words for fellows. We give you a little extra space if you're doing research to talk about your research in essay 2 for the fellows. That's not a lot of space. So please stick to the prompts. We give you prompts for the essays. Please stick to the prompts and only ask what we ask you to address. The deadlines for anyone who's proposing to study after your start of your overseas study would begin between June 1st and March 1st of 2023. If your overseas study falls between, the start date falls between June 4th and March 1st of 2023, this is the current application cycle. You should apply now. The deadlines for the scholars is February 2nd. For the fellows, it's January 26th. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5:01. Too bad for you. That is our deadline. However, many campuses have their own on-campus deadline, an opportunity for you to submit your application to your campus rep or other faculty staff at your institution for them to look over, to dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure that this application is competitive as it can be. Please check with your campus reps to find out if there's going to be an on-campus deadline. You do not want to miss it. Please take advantage of every opportunity to have additional reviewers take a look at your application before it gets kicked off the bus. Also, we do have the option for campuses to give a campus evaluation, their own 2 cents on your application. They can't do that if they've never met you or reviewed your application. So if you want to take advantage of their ability to submit an additional campus evaluation, you'll need to meet with them early and often, which is why I said run, don't walk to your campus rep's office. And then finally, contact us. We are more than happy to talk. We are more than happy to correspond, answer any questions you might have about your application. Please, under no circumstances should you ever send us anything in the mail. I have not set foot in an office in 18 months. Please send us an email, boren@iie.org. We are happy to keep our correspondence in writing if you want concrete answers from us. If you want a more casual conversation, 1-800-618 NSEP, that's 1-800-618-6737, I believe. That rings 4 different phones, including this one. So you're gonna get someone if you call the line, and we're happy to chat with you at length about any questions you might have. BorenAwards.org, that's our website. You've seen the QR codes throughout the presentation. There's so much information up on the website. And do keep an eye on the website over the next couple of months, because we're currently in the process of producing this cycle's webinars. We're gonna have webinars on everything from how to write a competitive application to a day in the life for one of the flagship language initiatives, specific presentations for ROTC, specific presentations about the service component. We're in the process of spitting out those webinars right now. And keep an eye on our website. You'll be notified when those go live. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. We're pretty much everywhere except for TikTok and Snapchat because we don't dance and we're too old. But other than that, you can find us online. And that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear from me today. I am happy to open up the floor for comments from the campus reps, comments from faculty, and of course, with all the time remaining, any questions from the attendees. And feel free to unmute yourself and jump right in. It's super casual. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. I saw a question that came in earlier. Have there been any Boren scholars or undergraduates awarded in Spanish in the last 5 years? Fellows, yes. Undergrads, I don't think so, actually. It helps to have a strong research argument, has been the case for Spanish in the last couple of years. I would have to look, but I'm doubtful that I know fellows for Mexico and Argentina, but I'm doubtful for scholars. Sorry.
So I'm hearing graduate students in STEM fields to facilitate research. Is that an accurate recap?
Yeah, that would probably be a strong way to go for Spanish. Yeah. Seeing a question, are countries such as Iraq and Syria not accessible? No, no, they are not on our current list of preferred countries. We would love, I mean, there are definitely languages there that we would love for you to be able to study, but security concerns, we can't take the risk of studying it. So if it's not on our preferred list, and if it's not in green or blue on that map, it's a no for Boren. Yes, I see a hand.
Hi, Kyle. I was going to ask, how does COVID factor into the whole award situation? If our country of interest that we want to go study in has a restriction right now, how does that factor into our application process, as this is the application season?
The dreaded crystal ball question. What is the COVID situation going to look like in the future? It's a valid question. I wish I knew. As far as the application is concerned, this current application cycle, if it's on the list as a preferred country, go forward as if we'll be able to send you. Operate as if this is going to be a normal year, and all things, your fingers crossed, we will be sending you to that country. If come this time next year, it's June and it's time for you to go overseas and things are still under restrictions, we will try to be as flexible and accommodating as we can be, pushing back your start date, changing the dates on your program. In rare cases, if it's possible to change countries, maybe even change countries, as long as you're still learning the same language. Although that's kind of rare, but we try to be as flexible with you as we can, and that's been the case even this year. There were a lot of countries where we just had to say no, unfortunately, where students just have not been able to take advantage of their Boren Awards. You'll always be a Boren Award recipient. You'll always have won an award, but unfortunately, if you can't go overseas to a particular country, there's not much we can do. But for the sake of the application, go for it as if everything's going to be normal. Hopefully, it will be. I see a question in the chat. The federal work assignment going to be remote or in person? Depends on the agency. And as far as if it will be in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, depends on the agency. Most positions will be in D.C., but there are lots of agencies that are scattered all about. In fact, we like to talk about Homeland Security. Any port of entry, anywhere that there's entry into the United States, there's a Homeland Security office. So there's lots of agencies that are scattered throughout the U.S. Excuse me. Most positions will be in D.C., but that shouldn't be. Don't think of it as impossible to find a position that's outside of the greater D.C. area.
I'm conscious of your time, Kyle. Thank you so much again. Were there any outstanding questions we didn't address that any student wants to bring up? Thank you again, Kyle, on behalf of Duke for joining us, and thanks to all the students as well. So I put in the chat, if you're interested in an advising session, I hope that's all right with you, Kyle. They can email me still, for a 15-minute advising session, or get in touch with Bevan or I as far as, completing an application. So
It's a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again, Kyle. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.